Hi guys, and welcome to this brand breakdown series. So this is basically going to be where I will take a brand that I found that I think is doing design really well and kind of just break it down, talk about what I think they're doing really cool shit with, whether it's like their website, their branding, packaging, any of that stuff. So I'm going to try, most of the time these brands will be kind of ones that do all of that really well, because that is what I think is important when everything is kind of cohesive across the board. So yeah, we're just going to break it down, talk about design pieces that work and just like why it's so well done, and also how you can maybe take small pieces of inspiration from these brands and how they decide to do things and use it in your own work or your clients' work. So we're going to start with this brand called Vitruvi. They are a Vancouver-based company. They make home scent products, I guess you could say, like diffusers and oil blends and stuff like that. I've known about this brand for a while. For anyone that doesn't know, I'm from New Zealand, but I live in British Columbia. So I've seen it around a lot. And I have one of their diffusers, which I've had for a while, and I've recently noticed that they did quite a massive rebrand, and it just looks so good. So this looking at this brand, like I came across their website recently and everything, and looking at all of it was kind of what inspired me to do this series, because I feel like there was just so much I could talk about, and I love doing this kind of stuff. So that's what kind of sparked the idea for this whole series, is really taking a deep dive on these really cool brands and just seeing what cool shit they're doing. So these are going to be split into two sections. So the first section, I'm going to go over like the brand, so like I'll go look at their website, their social media, all that stuff. And then the breakdown is going to be where I will talk a little bit more specifically about things they've done that you could use as inspiration in your own work or your client's work or anything. So I'll explain that a little bit more when we get there, because it's not about ripping anyone off or anything like that. So I'm going to like walk through that process a little bit more, because I'm very conscious of that inspiration line and how you can very easily cross that, but we'll chat about that more when we get there. So yeah, first we're going to check out the brand. So I'll go over to their website and everything, and we can get started. So I've loaded up a few of their like website pages and Instagram posts and stuff. So I'm not sure exactly how long this brand they have been around. So I'm gonna probably start with their Instagram, because I feel like that will give you like a good overview of like where they're at now. So I think they have kept this logo mark in their actual logo, this type. I believe that's the same, and then everything else about the branding is pretty new. So this will like give you a good idea of their whole vibe, just to like start off with. So yeah, a lot of like very clean photography, focus on the product, really nice packaging. So we're gonna like get to this in a second. But I thought I would just quickly kind of show you where they're at now, because I also found some of their old branding. So yeah, this is their website. So their whole vibe is very clean and fresh and just really slick. So I think that's something they were pretty conscious of with the rebranding. And I don't know any personal details about this whole process. I did find the studio that did the branding, so I'll show that in a second. And there's also a blog post I found where they kind of talked about it a little bit, which is quite cool, because I think sometimes brands don't do that. So it is kind of cool that they even just wrote this little blog post, and then I also just found it by just Googling the studio. which was really cool. So kind of like they said, you can kind of tell right off the bat, even from just their Instagram I've shown you without going full in depth, they call themselves a design first brand. And I guess they kind of got to a point where they started growing a lot more and they really wanted to evolve the brand. And they said here it took them over 2 years, almost 2 years. So the goals were to create design cohesion across the collections, to tell a visual scent story, which is really cool because I think when you start to look at their branding and their packaging, it's very focused on the product. Packaging is super simple, and then they use a lot of like photography of like natural elements and all of it, which I really love. So like this is their branding for their packaging, which is really awesome. And I know in a couple spots they really took time to think about what colors represent each scent. So like this is this one side of the packaging. So they have all these really awesome gradients, which is just on one side of the box, which let me see if I can find some. Kind of like this. This is a different product, but like the sides of the box have the gradient and then the front is really simple. So I think that is a really awesome way to kind of give it a little more personal touch without it being like super in your face. So I really like the way that they've chosen to do that, like the packaging with these subtle gradients, and then the branding itself just uses like very simple earthy photography, which I think is really cool. I also really love these gradients because I think gradients these days are kind of like a hot thing. They're very trendy, but there's a very like easy line to cross where they feel really tacky and like kind of just like overdone, or they're too bright, or they're too like, yeah, tacky is kind of the word that keeps coming to mind because I think a lot of people are doing them. But the way they've done these ones, they have, I think first of all, there's more than just 2 colors in pretty much all of them. So there's like multi-colors going on, and the fact that I can't really tell, I mean, it might be the packaging itself, but it has a texture to it, which I really like, and that might be the stock they've used for the box that gives it that texture, or it could be built into the gradient itself, but I really like that. And also just the fact that you can tell it's like, it's not a perfect gradient, like it's not a straight line gradient, or it's not even like a perfect radial. Like that's kind of the like 2 of the main gradients is like linear, which is like a line from like dark to light or whatever, or a circle one where it's like directly from like a circle out. But these aren't that. So these like, you can tell these probably took a lot more time to work on and like really dial in the colors and the like tones and how they kind of move into all these different shades for each individual box. So I really like that because that's, like I said, the whole gradient thing. I think a lot of people are doing it because it was very trendy, but the way these guys have done it is like so clean and not tacky, and it just looks really nice. Also because, like I said, when it's paired with the rest of the box being so clean, it's just like, I just freaking love it. It's so good. So we can actually go over here. So this is the studio that did the whole rebrand. So we can check out what they've got on their site. Yeah, so they really wanted to infuse sensorial, I haven't heard that word before, elements to the whole offering. So make the ear yours, which is kind of funny that it's like almost make it yours, which I didn't even know until I like started doing this video. I was like, oh, their tagline is like almost make it yours, make the ear yours. Yeah, so you can tell this is the whole vibe. And like they say here, let me just move that. They're inspired by the balance of science and nature. And so I kind of assumed that this font, this typeface was a custom one, which it is. So they developed this typeface, which is awesome. Where is it? Yeah, it's just really cool. And like obviously having a custom typeface for your brand is like kind of like peak design, because then no one else can have the same shit as you. But I really like that. So you can kind of see what they're saying with like the pulling in the elements and like that combination of science and nature with like the photography and then the very clean packaging, like the oil bottles themselves don't have anything other than just that massive focus on that really cool custom type, which I think is awesome. Yeah. And then this is something I'm going to get to soon on the website, where they've got like the some layering going on with like photography and then the circle masked image over the top and stuff like that. So yeah, that's the custom font, which I think is awesome. So yeah, like I was saying, they really were pretty intentional about the gradients. Like they really thought about what does this scent look like. Like if you were going to translate that smell into a color, how does that look? And even though like even just this image, there's obviously a lot of different colors going on. They kind of have like a similar sort of vibe to them. Like you can tell there's not one that's like insanely neon versus some that are like really dark. Like it's still all part of the same family. And again, I think part of what makes the packaging so good is the fact that it's just on that one side, or maybe it's on both sides, but it's not like the entire thing. So it's kind of like, it looks really cool. Like I've seen it in some stores and it looks really cool because like the front is quite clean, but then you kind of get like a peek of the side, and it's just like, it looks really cool when they're all like lined up next to each other. So yeah, that's kind of the packaging. And then we can kind of check some stuff out on the website. So as you can imagine, like the website is very clean and like focused on the product. Got the Instagram feed. So one thing I've noticed, which I couldn't find exactly any like specific information on it on the studio's website, was their branding color palette. So from what I can tell, it looks like they only use this very light baby blue as like a brand color. Like obviously the packaging, they all have their own individual gradients and stuff, but as a Vitruvi brand color, I can only see that they've used this baby blue in a couple spots. So one of them being the footer of the website, and then the other one being their Instagram profile image. So assuming that they only have that one brand color, I really like that. So I think that just keeps it really clean, and like their whole vibe of focusing on the product, like their product design is amazing. Like even just their original diffuser, this one, and then this is, I guess, a very recent product launch of this new humidifier. Like the design of this product is amazing. It just looks really cool. So I like that they've really chosen to focus on the product itself, and the custom type is kind of a big part of their new branding. And then just like photography of the elements or like the product and the spaces. Like it doesn't need tons of extra shit because the branding and the product can speak for itself, which I think is important with brands like this. And I think that's a theme. There's another brand that I'm thinking of doing for another part of this branding breakdown series that has a similar vibe. So that might be like kind of a recurring theme with brands in this space, like a product-based brand that they really focus on simple branding and the product itself is kind of the focus. So let's check out a page. So yeah, like overall the like main website is like very simple, pretty standard for like a product website. There was a couple cool things that I mean you can also tell just quickly looking at, they've obviously done like photo shoots for all of these, which even just scrolling through them like this looks really awesome. Like I just freaking love that. Like you can tell, like when you start to see them like this as a whole and you scroll over them, you can see how they've thought about the colors. And like obviously it would be amazing to be able to actually smell these so we could see what it's like, but even just looking at them you can tell by like the names, like golden, mixed feelings, this is kind of like dark and moody, breathe is like light and fresh. Yeah, so let's go check one out because there was a couple of things on the product page that I really liked. So obviously this is pretty simple, focus on the product. Again, like the design and everything of this is so good that that is totally the focus. So then I'm assuming this gradient is also the same as the box gradient. It looks a bit pixelated, but I get that it's kind of sometimes hard to work that in. But that's like got a really slight movement to it, which is quite cool. And then down here they've got this section, which I kind of dig. You can kind of like scroll over and see some different things. So the images pop up. Okay, maybe it was on a different page. There was a layout that, was it this one? Let me find it. Okay, yeah, so it was on this page. It might be in a couple different spots. So when I come down here, I like this layout, how they kind of go between the square image and the circle image. And I know that they've used this in a couple different spots on the website where it's like the 3 columns, but it's like the simplest thing, by the way. This is like really basic stuff. But just that, like the alternating of the shape of the image is really cool. Yeah. So yeah, overall, I think the website is like very simple, easy to navigate. Like it's kind of, the website is nothing crazy, but it doesn't need to be, and that's not the point of it. Like a product website like this needs to be simple, easy to find what you're looking for, easy to buy shit. Like that's kind of the point of it. So yeah, that's kind of the brand overall and the things that I really like about it. Even stuff like this, like it's really simple, just having this background image. Whoops, I don't want honey. this background image and then the circle product over the top. That's really simple. Yeah, so overall it's just like very clean. And you can tell like everything was very intentional about all of it. Like the whole brand, the font, their custom typeface, the photography, the gradients on the packaging, all of it. I think I also found, I went back on the Instagram and they did a couple of posts. So I think this was inspo for this new branding. They posted this photo, which I love because you can kind of tell, like, obviously that's the blue. And then you can kind of already tell, like, the vibe they were going for, like, when you look back. So now that we've seen everything, and then we can see this, I'm assuming was like a small chunk of the inspo board, but just that really clean photography and some cool type and the blue. So yeah, you can see they were kind of experimenting with gradients at this stage. Some like pretty abstract photography in there, which is really cool too. You can even kind of see, like, I can see how there's like natural gradients that appear in nature that I feel like probably inspired a lot of this stuff. Like some of these images, one thing that is kind of fun to play around with if you take photography, take some cool photos, put them in Photoshop and start like playing around with effects. Like if you just had like an image of a leaf or something and you started blurring it, it would look like this, like these green ones. Or like certain images of flowers, like if you just took a normal photo of a flower and like blurred it, it would look something like these, really. So whether that was part of their intention or not, I feel like it probably would be, because it just looks, the gradients look very natural. I guess that's kind of the whole, maybe what I was getting at when I was talking about gradients before, and that they don't look tacky, they just look really clean, as they feel like they have a natural element to them, like they weren't just like fabricated in Photoshop with like a 2-click thing. So yeah, I really like that about it. And then obviously that's like a massively zoomed out version, but I think that's cool, like when brands kind of show this process a little bit. If I go back on their Instagram, so you can see, I think that was one of the inspo board images that they like are sharing on the gram. Yeah, you can even see, like, obviously that, if that is the actual image of the gradient, like you can tell it's got a ton of grain and like overlay and lots of stuff going on. So it's not just like a flat gradient, which is what can make them look kind of tacky, I guess. Yeah, I think this is kind of where the new branding started. So if we go back, it's like not as, like if we start going back from before the new branding, obviously they were probably working on it at this point, but they weren't really showing too much of it. Like it doesn't feel as kind of clean and like tightened up. I was also going to show you. So I found, this was their old branding, which I found on the Free People website, because I guess maybe some people are still selling it. But yeah, this was their OG branding. Like this is what it was like when I brought mine, my diffuser. So it was like very simple and like not that interesting to look at. Like it wasn't bad. And you can see they've still got their original logo mark and the logo itself. So yeah, it used to be just very simple and there wasn't much to it. Like this, whether they did it themselves or they had a designer do it, or it just wasn't as a big branding project. But yeah, you can see like the massive shift. And this is just obviously a small snapshot of what it used to be like from that to what it is now is crazy and just so good. Like I think they just did such a good job at it. So yeah, that's kind of overall a look at the brand, what they're doing, like brand, socials, website, all that stuff, and just like what I think is really good about it. And so now we've like checked out the brand and everything, we can do a bit more of a breakdown. So this is where I am going to like pull out a few things that I really like about it and talk about how we could use it as inspo in our own branding. And I'm also going to do like a mini Squarespace kind of walkthrough of like a couple of things that like how I might take it as very light inspo and like work it into something else in a different way. So I've chosen a few main things here, what I like about this whole brand and how we could use it as inspo. So the first thing I really like, and this is obviously, like I said, kind of an assumption that they only have a single brand color. So I really like that, and I've talked about this before in a few different places, but I think sometimes brands get really stuck in thinking you need like a bajillion colors, like a bajillion brand colors for all the shit you got to do, but in reality you don't, and you can have one or you can also have none. I remember once a long time ago, I think maybe it was from my Squarespace course, or maybe someone was working with a Squarespace design kit and she emailed me. She was like, I can't figure out like my freaking brand color palette. Like, what do I do? And I was just like, well, you don't have to have one at all. Like, you can just have black and white stuff and like photography. And she was like, oh my gosh, what do you mean I can just not have them? I was like, yeah, you can do whatever you want. So single color branding is just so good because, kind of like I've explained, it really puts the focus on the rest of the brand, and the whole vibe of the photography, which is also the next point. Like I think those two kind of go hand in hand a little bit. Single color branding, big focus on like really clean photography that fits the vibe of the brand itself and like really helps bring it all to life and give it texture and make it feel like earthy and like a breath of fresh air and all of that stuff. So those two kind of go hand in hand. But yeah, I definitely love the single color brand vibe, especially when you can really pick one that fits the mood and fits the strategy and the whole mission of all of it, which I think that blue really does. Also relating back to their tagline, make the air yours, or whatever it is, like that blue, it just feels like a sky blue, like it just fits. So I think that's a cool one. And yeah, focus on photography, like I said. Yeah, the simple website layers. So that's what I'm gonna go into Squarespace to in a second and kind of show you how I might take that as inspo. But that's where I'm kind of talking about where they had like a really simple background image or video of like the ocean or whatever, and then over the top they would have the circle image with the product itself or whatever. So I like that really simple layering, and then the text on the side. So I think that is really cool. And the uber natural gradients, which I feel like I talked about the gradients a lot, but I just really like them. And like I said, I think another way you could do that would be taking some really simple nature photography and like blurring it in Photoshop and seeing how that goes, which I'll also play with in a second. Just to get some like cool gradients that originate from like nature and photography, and then play around with them, add some grain to them, make them a bit more interesting, put some layers on top of them and like play around with the layer effects and stuff like that. So yeah, those are kind of a few points that I think I really like about this brand and that could be cool to like keep in your back pocket as ideas for future brands. So something that I am very passionate about in the world of design, and you may hear me talk about this a lot, but it's like very important to me and like how I approach design and everything, is not like ripping people off. So like I talked about in the Design That Hits Different class, definitely watch that if you haven't seen it, because it explains a lot of my philosophy and ideas towards the world of design and how I approach design. So I think everything is a remix, first off. Nothing is completely original. Everything you're going to design is like kind of a combination of all these different things you've seen, all the shit you've experienced, and like the styles you really like. Like everything is a remix. Nothing is ever 100% original. So it's not realistic to think that we can just like sit down at our computer and like wipe our brains clean of everything we've seen and like any inspo at all and just like come up with shit. It's not really how it works. So I think when I'm approaching new projects and I need new ideas, it's like important to think about like when you see brands you like I've just broken down this one. It's important to really get down to like the nitty gritty of what you like about it. Because I think that's where a lot of the times people rip off branding, is when it's kind of like the lazy version of it. Like people rip off like an entire thing instead of just like sitting down and being like, okay, what do I actually really like about how they've done all of this? Like exactly like this. Like pick a few things that you really like about it and you think they did a good job at, and then you can kind of take those tiny little things and combine it with your own style, your own experience, the goals of whatever your project you're working on, the vibe of the project you're working on, and it kind of evolves into this whole new thing rather than just being like a rip of something else and you're just like copying it. So I think there's ways like this where you can use inspiration and not like you're not ripping anyone off. It's just like you respect the way it's been done and you know that you've got your own shit you want to make and you're like, okay, I really like how they did those gradients. Like what if I could do them in my own way and like layer them with my own like photography and handwriting and all of those things. So that might be something I cover a lot in throughout this these videos, other classes and other breakdowns and stuff, but that's very important and I want to make it like very clear that I don't want you to just like rip things off. I think you really have to like sit down and just like pick out some basics of like, okay, that shape is really cool. Like how could I do that? So anyway, I wanted to kind of explain that a little bit before we go into the next step, which I'm going to like go into Squarespace and Photoshop a little bit. So I'm going to like play around with a couple of simple shape layouts that they've done and how I would use them. And then I also really want to see if I can find a couple photos and just put them in Photoshop and see if I can make some gradients out of them and just like show you this very real time. So I haven't pre-done any of this, so this will be like very much me doing it and you just watching me as I do it, because I think that is kind of just a bit more real time. So let's do that and we'll start in Photoshop and go from there. I mean, we'll start in Photoshop and then we'll do Squarespace afterwards, I think. Yeah. Okay, so like I said, what my initial idea for this, and this may not work at all, this could be like a complete failure, but I imagine, and I feel like I've tried it a little bit before, like if we take a couple photos and we want these photos, so this is where I'm going to be taking a couple photos, put them in Photoshop and play around with the blur tool. or the blur feature. So I can already tell this one would probably be pretty good for it because it's already got a natural gradient. Like if you stood away from the screen like 10 meters and looked at this would probably just look like a gradient, even though it's not. So that one will be an easy win. But for this, I'm gonna look for, I don't want anything that has a ton of color going on because it's just gonna look messy and kind of ugly. So I'll see if there's any other ones. These are all gonna be green. So these are all of my Unsplash collections where I just keep a good stash of stuff. I feel like this one could be kind of fun. This also reminds me of one of the images they had in their inspo. It was like water. It was like this, but it was golden. So I kind of want to see what that one will do. This one might be interesting. I can tell that it might get a bit muddy if we blur that one too much because there's not like a clear, like this one here, I can kind of tell that it's like a tiny bit lighter at the top and then darker at the bottom, so maybe that'll show. This one isn't, like it's kind of just all over the place, so it might look a bit messy, but I'll try it. Now see if we have one other one. I mean, that one is also going to be pretty easy. That one would probably work. So I'm going to open these in Photoshop. And then we're going to go filter, blur. There's a lot of blurs. I'm going to start with the, I think it's Gaussian. And we can just keep the, if we just keep the preview on, it will kind of show us. So like, and we could, this looks very smooth. So like I said, the other ones, like you could tell like it had a grain or like a texture to it. So, but that's kind of the easy part. Like getting the gradient, like that already looks cool. And you can tell it's not perfect how we've got like this line here. Like if I turn off the preview, it's got that slightly darker line in there, which does show up as we blur it. So already I think this is looking sick. And it's just like a fun way to get some really natural gradients. And then from here, you could just apply like grain. I would probably do the grain with like an overlay layer, but you can do it. You can do it in here with noise. So like already, even though we're not zoomed in, you can tell that it just makes it look less polished. So that looks pretty cool. I feel like it's a tiny bit like too bright. So I would maybe like dial down the saturation. But yeah, already I dig that. Like it just looks like a natural gradient. And then I have some other ones. So we'll see what these look like. Whoops. So when I open it, it's like automatically going to keep that same amount that I had on the other one. So yeah, this one you can tell was like a little bit different, but I kind of like, so this one is different because the original version of this leaf one, like I said, it was already quite like an obvious gradient, whereas this one isn't. So when we blur it, there's a lot more detail. Like it's not really a gradient, it's kind of like just a weird blurry image, which I also kind of like. And like obviously I don't have a project in mind for this. I'm just experimenting with different ways of creating textures and shit based on the inspo from Vitruvi. So you can also just do it. This is kind of what I like about seeing other designs you love. Like you really gotta use it as like a jumping off point and don't worry about where it might lead you, and don't think that your outcome needs to be the same as the inspo, because it doesn't and it shouldn't. That's not the point. It's kind of like, okay, I'm going to play around with this and like, where could this take me? Like, this isn't a gradient, but it kind of looks cool and it's something we could fuck around with, and like maybe add some noise to it, and like maybe you could add some other layers to it and play around with that. So even that is kind of cool. I like that it's not a clean gradient. And then I'll see what some of these other ones. I feel like this one's going to be weird and maybe not that good. Yeah, it's kind of weird. It just looks like some... I mean, but when we go real blurry like this, like that totally looks like it could be a gradient for their packaging, right? Like, obviously minus all the noise and the texture and stuff, but like, and again, it's still very polished. But to get like down here, like the previous one, I dialed back the blur a little bit. This one needs way more blur because I just don't like that. But when we get up here, it's really cool because it's much more of a gradient, as more than just like a blurry image. So like even from there, like if you like it, you can also just go and then play around with the saturation, like if you want it to be way more bright, or if we want it to be like more goldeny. Like, it's just very easy to start playing around with this stuff. And then I forgot what my last one was already. Oh yeah, this one you can kind of already, similar to the first one, like you can kind of see its natural gradient already. And it's quite light. So you can like make it a little bit darker. So yeah, even just, let me put them in even just messing around with that is fun. And like, I don't have a project for this, but like it definitely gives me an idea for future projects when I'm like thinking of what kind of backgrounds I want to use. That is totally something I could play around with. Like, find some really cool stock photos, mess around with the blur, layer some textures and stuff, and it's like quite custom. Like, these aren't just straight textures that are already uploaded on Unsplash that you download. Like, they're customized, so that is also going to give like an extra layer of customization to whatever you're working on, rather than just like straight downloading flat images and using it exactly as it is. So yeah, that was just a quick little idea of some inspo, playing around with, experimenting with something new. So I'm also going to go into Squarespace and do like a couple things with some layouts in there. So what I want to do here is I kind of just want to use these like layers as very loose inspiration to like recreate a similar kind of section in my own way in Squarespace. So I have this website which is a 7.1 and I'm using Fluid Engine for some of it. This is kind of a demo / a new template that I'm working on, but so I'm gonna create a new section. It's a blank one. And so I kind of like, this one has like a bit of a border. So I'm going to do the inset. And then I'm going to add a background image. Actually, I might use that one. I like that one. And I feel like I I want to take that off. It almost doesn't look real. It looks like computer generated or something. And then I want to add a circle. Well, maybe we'll start with a circle. And this one, I'm going to see, I'll start with this one. These are just images I've already uploaded into the site. So I'm going to edit that one. I'm going to do a shape. It is kind of handy that Squarespace have added these like shapes and stuff in here now, like for shit like this. So I'm going to start with a circle. Maybe make it a bit bigger. I mean, this is obviously a very simple layout too, by the way. Also, I don't love, this is going to annoy me. So this here, I mean, this is also just playing around, but I don't love how the scrolling section has a white background and then the border of this section has a white background. Like, it just looks weird. So I would either, yeah, just change either one of these. So I think I'm going to change I could also just move it, but I'm going to change the colors. I also just don't love that section. So this is not final. I'm just kind of working on this section here. Maybe I would add a button. Yeah, the spacing of this is kind of annoying. There's like a massive gap there. Oh. So we can do this. I think it's because I have another line. Okay. I'm going to add another text block. Okay, that's better. I feel like is that right? So, and it depends on the brand, right? Like what you're working on. So obviously I was just playing around with like shapes. So like this one, I kind of want to play around with, yeah, most of these shapes aren't that good. Like I think some of these are just kind of weird. What I want to do is, I want it to be a square. Why isn't that? Okay, we'll leave it there. And I kind of want to play around with the corner radius, so I don't want it to be a circle, but like maybe maybe even just one corner. I think this background image needs a bit of an overlay, just because like that, it's like a bit too hard to read that text. Just brighten it up a bit. I don't love this green for this button. Maybe I'll just delete the button for now. Oops. I also don't think that is centered. Like these three aren't centered together. Even though this obviously I'm just playing around, but anyway, I don't like this layout. I don't think this looks good. But this is kind of, I just want to show you like how you can like very loosely take inspiration and like use it in different ways without completely copying something. So I'm just like kind of showing you what I would play around with. Like if this was a real project and if this had like goals and kind of we had like designed the brand, we designed the branding already and we kind of had direction, this would probably be a lot easier. So like maybe I would know, like maybe we would decide that we want rounded corners on all the images, and like if they were like the whole website is going to have rounded corner images like that, then I would change that to that setting. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to like go over how I would take like very small ideas and like transform them across different branding. But overall, I really dig Vitruvi, so I'll link all of their stuff below if you want to check them out. I think it's an awesome brand, and I'm stoked that I feel like this was a good one to like kick off this series with, and there'll be lots more of this to come. Diving into some other cool brands that I have come across. So if you find any that you would like me to do this for, you can send it to me in office hours or just shoot me a DM and I'll check it out and see if it fits, and if it's something that I feel like I could talk about. So yeah, hopefully this was kind of fun to watch and you maybe picked up a couple things that could inspire you in your own projects, or maybe you just like seeing things like this get broken down. I really like talking about this stuff. I don't know what it is. I just, when I see something like this, I'm like, that's just fucking cool, and I would love to share what I like about it. And that's what inspired this little series. So yeah, definitely check out the brand. They do really cool shit. I'm not affiliated with them in any way, by the way. And yeah, keep making cool shit, keep doing shit on your own terms, and see you soon.